Hello students, this is Mrs. Moore coming to you on behalf of ELA 7 Summer School. Welcome. We're going to have 4 weeks together of daily lessons. And so this is lesson 1.1, first week, first lesson, to be done on Monday. And the very first, you should have your packets by now, of course. Wonderful, I have written all over mine, of course. And the very first assignment you see is to read a poem by Arthur Chapman called Out Where the West Begins. You have a little packet that shows you what you're meant to be doing every day, and this says day 1. The lesson is resilience and success. Those are the two things we're supposed to be looking for. Out Where the West Begins. Read and annotate Out Where the West Begins, then answer the text-dependent questions and discussion questions. So first, let's begin by looking at the poem quickly. Now, usually I'm not going to read you an entire bit of writing here, but when it's a poem, that's something that I think it's very helpful to hear a poem out loud. So as you're studying it and thinking about it for this particular assignment, you should read it aloud as well. So once again, Out Where the West Begins by Arthur Chapman. Listen along. Out where the hand clasps a little stronger, out where the smile dwells a little longer, that's where the West begins. Out where the sun's a little brighter, out where the snows that fall are a trifle wider, where the bonds of home are a wee bit tighter, that's where the West begins. Out where the skies are a trifle bluer, out where friendship's a little truer, that's where the West begins. Out where a fresher breeze is blowing, where there's laughter in every streamlet flowing, where there's more of reaping and less of sowing, that's where the West begins. Out where the world is in the making, where fewer hearts in despair are aching, that's where the West begins. Where there's more of singing and less of sighing, where there's more of giving and less of buying, and a man makes friends without half trying, that's where the West begins. All right, so let's think for a couple of moments together about what you're supposed to do with this poem. Okay, so first of all, this is under the title of Resilience and Success, as are all of the works that you're supposed to read this week. Success is a pretty easy word to understand. It means different things to different people, of course. I consider myself successful if I film this introduction to you and I don't sneeze, or burst into laughter, or have a dog bark, or have a child come in and say, "Where are the spoons, Mommy?" You see, success means different things to different people. So we have to consider what success might mean in this poem. And we're given a lot of sense of what's good and what isn't as good in this poem. Okay? Now, resilience, that is a more difficult word. Now, where can we go to find the meanings of words? Dictionaries, of course, so always remember that. But to be resilient is to be flexible, to be able to bounce back. So we'll have to think about what that might mean for this poem as well. Now, let me tell you what I did with this poem. I sat at the table with my children one dinner, and my children range in ages 15 to 12 to, I have 2 8-year-olds, and I read this poem 2 lines by 2 lines, 3 lines by 3 lines to my children, and I would stop and say, "What do you think this means?" A lot like class, for those of you who've had me as a teacher. And all the way from the 8-year-old to the 15-year-old, they had different ideas, and that helped us to understand what the poem means. It's one thing to read a poem and say, okay, the West, but it's another to really think about every word, and every word certainly counts in a poem. So I would suggest that you think in those terms. You're being asked to annotate the poem. Perhaps you've heard what it means to annotate before. If you're not sure, annotation is simply the notes you take as you read. So as you can see, oops, let's see if I can hold this better for you. I have annotated all over my copy of the poem in pink because that's just kind of how I roll. But I wrote different ideas that my children had as I read it to them. I wrote my own little ideas, things that caught my eye, and that's all annotating is. There is no one right way to annotate. And sometimes annotating can get in the way of your reading, to be frank, so you have to decide when it's appropriate and when it isn't. Sometimes you need to just read a story and maybe one quick little dash here, so you'll know later to go back and think about a certain passage. But you underline words, you make notes. It's all about kind of learning what works for you as you're in that age when you're learning to take notes and do things in a way that is specific to your learning style. So maybe what you could do one night, well, it would probably be Monday, is pull this poem out at dinner with your family, brothers, sisters, folks, and read it to them, and all of you together see what you think. Okay, that could be a very good idea, and you could annotate as people talk. That could be good practice. You will then see in the writing, just to make sure you understand, there are footnotes that help define any words that the authors have decided, the authors of this packet, might be unfamiliar to you, which is helpful. And then you have discussion questions where you're meant, and I answered mine in pink, right? Where you're meant to answer some questions that are going to talk to you about what is resilience and what is success, okay? And that's what you're supposed to be doing.